Hello, Lovelace, and welcome to today's English lesson. As you can see from our objective for today, can I write a biography? Now, this is going to be your cold write task for today, because I believe you've done biographies before. Now, a reminder, a biography is the story of a person, usually written chronologically, so usually following through the various steps of their life in time order. The difference between a biography and an autobiography is that an autobiography, you're writing about yourself. A biography, you're writing about somebody else. So today, can I write a biography means that we're going to be writing about somebody else. Okay, but we'll get to that in a moment. Our second LO is simply, who is it? I'm going to be describing a person from literary history, giving you a few clues along the way, and see if by the end of the session, you've figured out who it is that we're talking about and who we're going to be talking about for the next few lessons. Okay, well, first of all, our cold write task. Here we go. Write a biography of someone in your family. This can be anyone, someone interesting, someone you look up to, or just someone you know well. Show me what you remember from your previous work on biographies. Okay, now I know at the moment it's been a really, really difficult time for everyone. So this is a great opportunity for you to reach out and spend some time talking to a family member, someone who's within your household, or maybe who's a bit further away. Maybe a chance for you to make a Zoom call or a Skype call or a phone call and just chat to them. Explain what you're doing, explain that you're writing a biography, and maybe it's a chance for you to chat and for them to tell you all about some of the things from their lifetime. Okay, so a really good opportunity to reach out, say hello to someone that maybe you've not spoken to recently, or maybe it's someone you speak to all the time, but you've not asked these sorts of questions. Okay, but there's your challenge. Think about someone in your family who you know a little bit about, or that you could find out a little bit about, and turn it into a biography. Try and write it in chronological order. Certainly try to use paragraphs to group together each little section of their life story. Okay, now you can focus on a particular time in that person's life, or you can be a bit more general and sort of do a little whistle-stop tour of the whole life, entirely up to you. But I'm just really curious to see how much you've remembered about the learning you did about biographies. Okay, so there's your main task for today, your cold write task. Obviously, you can come back to this screen at any time to remind yourself. But for now, I'm going to move on to the rest of today's lesson. Whose works have been adapted into all these films? Now, adapted means that someone wrote a story and then someone else, a screenwriter, came along and took that story and turned it into a movie script. Okay, so they've not written the movie, but they wrote the story, they wrote the book that the film was based on. Okay, so who do you think wrote the stories that inspired these films? We've got Star Wars 3, Revenge of the Sith. We've got Get Over It. 10 Things I Hate About You. He's still dead, but he's getting warmer. That's Warm Bodies. She's the Man. West Side Story. And even The Lion King. All these films, their stories are based on the work of this particular author. Any ideas so far? Well, let's move on. Whose complete works would fill a book this big? So who do you think has written so much that they could fill a book this size? There you go. From that angle, we're not quite sure how big this is. But let me tell you, this is a thick book. This is a really big lump of text. If we open it up, you can see the text is very, very small. So there's a lot of words in this book. Okay? You can see just how tiny the text is and just how many pages there are. Okay? So this person has written a lot of stories. Any ideas? But then again, this person's work has also been summarized and rewritten in so many different ways. So their work has been summarized to create a book this small. There we go. We can see just how teeny tiny the orange book is compared to the original one. There we go. You can see just how small this thing is. Compare when the book pages are open. Okay. So you can see just how fewer words there are in this smaller book. But I promise you, all the basic storylines, all the basic plots are covered. So all the work is in there, just maybe not in quite so much detail. Clearly, we couldn't put the same amount of detail in a book so small, but we can sort of shoehorn, squeeze in summaries of all this author's work. Has that given you any more clues as to who we might be looking at? Because this person's stories have been written in so many different ways, all sorts of different formats, from sort of their original, full, lots of detail, small text and so on, which I'll be quite honest, can sometimes be a little bit tricky to read because there's so many words and some of them are quite tricky words. But a lot of these stories have been simplified. They've been turned into graphic novels. So here's one example of a graphic novel where we've got cartoony images, lots of word bubbles, speech bubbles. There'd also be a little bit of narration and text normally on the page. So another version, another way of retelling this person's stories. Okay. Here we have a slightly simplified version, written for a much younger audience, so things are clearer, but also using language that a younger audience might understand. Okay. So the language has been made that bit easier. The characters and the artwork, more attractive to a younger audience, I suppose. Characters that you might recognize, sort of almost Disney-esque in their style of drawing. Oh, here we've got a full-blown comic strip. Again, nice, attractive, colourful images. And then each comic book section has got the narration, has got the description underneath to sort of take you through the story. So you can see 4 very, very different ways to retell the story, but just a way of communicating these fabulous, fabulous stories to different audiences. Any ideas? Let's move on. Another round of clues. Whose works might have been performed in a place like this? Okay, so here we have a theatre. Now, I think you'd all agree by the style, the design, this is quite an old theatre. I don't know how many of you have visited, say, a theatre in your lifetimes. Maybe you've been to a pantomime, but it doesn't look very much like this, does it? Okay, but this is a theatre, and the audience would be stood or sat all the way around and stood in front of the stage here. Let's take another look at another view of it. There we go. There's a little cutaway. Now this section would really be there. It's been cut away by the artist so we can see inside. And we can see the stage where people are telling the stories, performing the plays. We've got audience members stood on the floor, and we've got audience members up around on these balconies as well. Okay, so who might perform their stories, their plays, in a theatre like this? And there's the theatre from the outside. Some of you might have actually seen this theatre if you've ever visited London. I'm not going to say the name of the theatre, it might be too big a clue. But there's the theatre from the outside. And as I say, you might have seen it if you've visited London. Okay, so 3 views of the same theatre. So do we know anyone who might have had their stories performed in a theatre like this? Because there's your final little question. Do you know who it is? Do you think you can work out who this storyteller is? Someone who has inspired works like The Lion King, someone whose stories have been retold in cartoons and comic books, somebody who had their stories performed on the stage and continue to have their stories performed on the stage. Someone whose stories have inspired storylines in soap operas, have inspired storylines in all sorts of movies and other television programs. Someone whose stories have inspired other authors to write and create. Possibly the best known author ever. So, do you know who it is? If you do, see what you can find out about them. So just do a little bit of research, make a few notes as to who you think this person might be. And we'll be looking a little bit more at their work over the lessons to come. Okay. So just a reminder, your main task for today is that cold write. A biography about somebody in your family. It can be any member of your family. As I said earlier, this might be an opportunity for you to reach out and have a nice little chat with them. Ask them some questions about their life. Ask them what they'd like to share and make a few notes and then turn it into a more complete piece of writing. Or maybe you go for someone that you know very well, so you can do this piece of writing without any extra help. Okay, that's up to you. But show me just how much you remember about writing a biography. Think about the chronology, think about the paragraphs. Okay, I hope that's all very clear. That's the end of today. You take care of yourself as always and look after those around you, and I will see you very soon.